Hey kids, welcome to Stylus Rumble Rigging Animation sort of guide thing. Today we're going to be playing with Blue and doing a piggyback ride. So I'm just going to be setting up this rig, talking a little bit about how you can take two big rigs and combine them to save yourself some hassle later. So if I had to do a piggyback ride, I'd have my characters connected to one another and save myself the trouble of some convoluted selection process. So that's today's thing. I don't have any big announcements. People have been asking me if I have a Patreon. I don't. And the main reason for that is for patrons, you kind of need like bonus stuff. Like, oh, if you're a patron for this much, you get this much more. But I'm literally, any bit of free time that I have right now is going into creating these videos. So I don't have perks. That's not a thing. So if anybody wants to throw money at me, by all means, if you go to my Gumroad and you download one of the things I put up there, you can throw in a tip there. It's like Blue, the rigs here that I'm using are free on there, but feel free to leave a tip if you want to, and that'll pay for the coffee that gives me the energy to make these videos. I also have Amazon affiliate links, so on any of my book club videos you can click the links that are connected there, and that'll bring you to Amazon. And anything you buy there, it'll give me like a little tip as well. So a little sprinkle of cash for my coffee addiction. I'll put an affiliate link down below. For this guy, cartoon animation, he sits next to my desk by Preston Blair. It's got all sorts of animation goodies that you need in your life. And that's it. Let's get down to business. So today, I'm going to do a little thing where we talk about how you can take two characters that need to interact with one another and do that in a little bit more of a technical way to save yourself trouble. So in this instance, I'm going to take one Blue and he's going to piggyback the other Blue. So often what I'll see is animators will move this guy over here and then they'll start fixing Z-axis problems. So let's say we want to move this guy back. And then they'll pull this guy over here, and then that'll need to come forward, and they'll have to keep moving it forward, and they'll use giant numbers, and then they'll move the arm forward. So they'll do all that stuff, and then they will animate the characters separately. So they'll grab this character and then animate like they'll shift select things using some crazy like a lasso technique. It's so messy and bad. Don't ever do that. Wow. So what I'm going to do instead, it's a little bit more complicated in the beginning, but it's going to save you a ton of time. So if you have to use this character as a piggyback character for any length of time, I highly recommend doing this, where you set up a rig where the characters are connected using the network, and that way when you move one character, the other character is going to move sensibly from the beginning. So I'm just going to take my group. This is my character group here. It's teeny tiny because this network is going to be absolutely massive, which I know is making some of my rigging friends cringe. So I'm going to ungroup it, and when you initially ungroup it, you can select it and move it very easily. All my backdrops didn't move with it because for some reason those guys are not connected. I can move those guys over here. So some people use groups. Depending on the show you're working on, the kind of flavor of the riggers that you have, you may end up with backdrops or you may end up with a lot of groups. In this instance, it's one of the places where groups are going to be more helpful because you're going to be able to group the new pieces together a little bit more simply. If your two characters are not identical, there's a chance that your guy won't come in literally overlapping the other guy, but you'll have to figure that out when it happens. So now we have this massive network to deal with, which seems a little bit intimidating, but the more you actually go into your network and get used to this stuff, the more comfortable you're going to be with these giant scary messes. It's a good thing to remember. If you're using a massive network like this, you're not using little groups, it's not very tight. You can control click one of your chords. So in this case, this lower chord, and then control click here, and it's going to connect them. You don't need to drag your chords all the way across the screen, which I know is one of the biggest arguments against this type of rig. You just click there on your little chord and then control click there. And there's actually a pretty big click area around these little chords. So even though this seems like kind of hard to click, that actually clicked it there, and then you can control click here. So it's not as difficult as people make it out to be. So here we have blue 1 and blue 2. Let's give them another composite. So I'm going to give them a shared comp at the bottom. Control click, click. So now what I want is this guy's torso here to control this blue. So if he bends, this guy's going to come with his torso without me having to do that separately because I'm lazy. That's the, you know, the main moral of this story is that this is saving you from doing any work in the long run. So this is his torso peg. Below that, we start getting into his deformers and stuff, so I'm going to stay above that, and I'm just going to click on his master peg here. Put another peg here, so then we'll what we need to do. This guy's probably going to lean forward because he's carrying a bit of weight. He's going to want to have his knees bent, but that's something we can work on as we go. All right, and what I'm going to do is just fix the perspective of these shoulders a little bit. Because that's, you know, one of my pet peeves, when someone leans forward and their shoulders are not flattened out with perspective. So it just looks like they're leaning to the side. We want our character bending forward here. And we're going to move his head forward to offset the weight, as well as just giving this guy's head a little bit of space to exist. And for the sake of visibility, what I want to do is put this character's head in front of this character. Now, because this is a rotation rig, it already has Z-axis information in it. So it does make sense to use the Z-axis for layering here. But if you don't have any Z-axis information, what you could do is just plug the head in front and the hair in front. Boop. As you can see, because there is Z information on this ear, we're going to have to affect it anyway. But it depends on what works for your rigs. If you don't have any animation, I recommend using your ordering more. But if you're already dealing with tons of 3D stuff anyway, then there's no reason not to use your Z. I'm just going to quickly Google a piggyback. Piggyback. Because relying on your own memory is silly when you're sitting right next to all of the internet. Okay, so we have these crisscross arms where the arm is going across the torso, one or both. We have the little, just the hand peeking over the shoulders here. This one's good. We have the double arm cross. So we have a few decisions here on what we want to do. I think the best choice is going to be this, where we have one arm that's wrapped around for security and then one arm for being a jerk and pointing at things. It's also going to be a little bit easier not having to wrap both arms around. Oh, hello, Blue. These gangly old arms aren't doing anybody any favors. All right, so now this arm has to go in front of this guy. So let's try it out this way. That seems to work okay. And I'm just gonna do some fake foreshortening here so that his arm wraps around a little bit nicer. And then we'll probably want to do a hand on the torso, on the chest here, wrapping around. So we're gonna need to do drawing substitution for that. And then we've got our back arm here just pointing. So pretend we have a pointing hand. Hey, hi-ho, Silver. Oh, this blue has a single curve deformer up the torso, so we can get a little bit of cuddle in there. Looks all right. And then for the legs, so back up. And again, these giant spider legs are slightly an issue. So now this leg, here's my lower body. Now this is kind of a nuisance to see how tiny these are. Hopefully what I'm doing is making sense visually. So here's that leg. I'm gonna grab a collection of leg bits here, and I'm gonna try pulling that forward. Boop. So because it's a little bit hard to see, what I'm gonna do is just plug it into the back here, so that I know which one it is. It's the one in the very back. And then I'm gonna figure out where I want it to be. So here's the torso. I want it to be ahead of the torso and ahead of the legs, but I want to be behind the arms. So if you click these guys here, it's highlighting the chords, and you can see this is the torso and this is the legs. And we're gonna be able to pull this guy forward there. Now this does affect our pelvis patch, which is something we'll need to address. But if we did it in the Z-axis, we'd still have that same problem. Now, this leg here is going to work out a little bit better. I'm going to fakey pull in this leg a little bit again, just because it's going to look a little bit nicer aesthetically. And then the last thing I want to do is get it so that his arms here are holding the legs. Oop. So this arm needs to go in the back. In this case, I think I'm going to use the Z-axis. But you could pull the arm back in using your composites as well, whichever one you think is going to work out a little better. And now what I need to do, because he's so long-limbed, he's got these crazy spider arms. I want to think about what this guy's going to look like a little bit. So instead of the arm back and then forward like this, what I want to do is have his arm come backwards in space like this, and then forwards, and then fingers wrapped around in here. And same with this one. So this is going to come out, come in, and then come underneath there. I think this shoulder, I'd like it to be a little bit more like this. I don't know how visible that is. Let me just pull it over here. But this awkward jutting out shoulder here, I don't like how that looks. I want a nice curve shoulder, something that looks like this, just because it's going to look a little bit nicer. So let's take the time to get that stuff pretty. The hand here, I think the best way to do it would actually be to redraw the hand. So here I'm going to create a drawing substitution for the hand and just leave it empty. Empty hand, and then on the leg, I'm going to make a drawing substitution here, and then I'm going to be able to connect the two of them. So let's go into our drawing mode so you can see what I'm doing, and then I'm going to hack off the fingers and then rebuild them. So it's up to you whether you want to do the contort cowboy thing or if you want to paint in new fingers. I'm just going to do a quick hack job here, painting it in. If you know you're going to need to edit it a lot, then certainly take the time to make sure it's very tidy and manipulatable. And if you don't need to manipulate it, if you know it's going to be static, then you can get away with a little bit more of a sloppy job. But the thing is, if you take the time to do nice hands, you can always save them and use them again later. If you do hack job hands like this, then they're not really savable. They're just a mess. There we go. We're going to have to put it on the line art layer. Here it's on the color art layer. So rather than trying to select these pieces, what I'm going to do is select the piece I don't want, Control-Shift-I to invert my selection, cut it, and then paste it on this layer. And that works a little bit better. The thumb needs to go behind. So let's have a look. No overlay. The underlay exists in behind. So I'll grab the thumb. I'll put it on the underlay because that's not going to affect this stuff down here. Auto patch is using line and color. Overlay, no overlay. That's not used to cut anything. So underlay is a good safe place for that thumb. And now this guy here, again, I'm going to create a drawing substitution. I don't have one that works, so I'm going to just hack off the extra bit. Oop. So now if we move the leg, the hand will move, and then we'll adjust our arm to line up with the hand. It's a little bit of a backwards thing. This is one way around it, is to just tape your hand onto something and then manipulate your arms later. It's going to be a lot easier to keep this connection really clean and save you some headache. Let's just see. Drawing stuff for the sleeve. Now, anytime I make a new drawing for any piece, I'm making a drawing substitution because if I need to go back to the original, I don't want to redraw something I already had. That's the worst. There you go. A little bit of a fakey perspective. And the same thing here. Boop. Empty hand. Boop. So now we've got, boop. Our hand, we want it to be about there. I'm going to, let me see what pieces I have. The overlay is not being used, liner and color art. So again, I'm going to take anything that needs to go in the back and put it in the back. In this case, it's just the palm of the hand that needs to go in the back. We're going to want this thumb to be more this way. I like designing my hands like this in little pieces because then if I have to redraw a hand quickly, I'm not fighting myself. I have like a couple little fingers, so if I just need to extend one finger, I don't have to redraw the stuff behind there. I already have it available to myself, and it's doing your future self a favor. I always say that I'm lazy because I want to do the least amount of work possible, but the best way to be lazy is to be proactively lazy so that you're setting yourself up for a better future. So if you take more time at the beginning to set something up, like this whole rig here, this piggyback rig, it feels like you're wasting time, because like maybe you could have had so much animated by now, but in the long run everything is going to animate so much faster, and if you get a revision or you have to change something, it's going to be so much easier than trying to manage complex selections. So whenever I go in and I strip down rigs like this and I create something new, my goal in the end is to do less work. So if you had one scene where you needed a very fast piggyback ride, then this doesn't make sense in terms of time. You could get away with something that's a little bit more of a hack job. Like maybe you only do the first step where you connect the torso to the character, and then everything else you can just manually do. But it's really a matter of calculating what is going to be the best bang for your buck. If you have two characters that are connected for most of an episode, then you definitely want to go in and make a special rig for that, and you're not going to hurt yourself. Ta-da! So now his legs are so skinny, Drazy. Oh, this character. Let's get rid of this. So again, it's going to be a matter of animating the leg first and getting your hand where it wants to be, and then matching it up later. And it seems a little bit convoluted, but this connection is not going to be floaty, which I think is going to be the most difficult thing. And now this character can wiggle about and sort of stretch himself out. So this hand, you can wrap around the chest as well. You can actually make it part of the chest. The only issue is if you are going to use the deformer in here, then it might get a little bit distorted. But depending on the motion, I think that could be worth it. And now when we move this guy, our second blue is going to move along for the ride. This guy can point and tell you what you need to do. Go this way, do this. You can... Hello. This leg here, I already have a drawing substitution on the leg. I think my choice here would just to be very simple to just cut this part out, this upper line here, and just make sure it's lined up there. Figure out where the pocket should be, probably more over here. This shoulder, again, like I said, I'd want it to be a little bit rounder. I'd go for a simple approach on that, a little like that. I might even lean him in closer. Because he's so skinny, it looks like he's not even getting a hug in there. But you don't want to go in so much that you're losing the face of this guy. There we go. So now we have our little piggyback ride. Dun, 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 dun. Bye, folks. Thanks for coming. Whee! They're best friends and brothers. Go for a piggyback ride. Add in some little eyebrow deformers. I feel like if I do a blue 3.0, I'll add in some deformers on the eyebrows. It's default. Just putting them in is a pain in my butt. That's better. Oh, there's an issue. So I'm just playing around with it now and checking to see if anything is falling apart. Right now we've got this outer arm cutting through. So it's always important to check your rigs. Boop. Just need to pull this back a little bit more. And if you do end up doing a lot of Z-axis and your stuff gets really sloppy, like some things are starting to cut through the background and some things, things of that nature, then the easiest way is to go down to the super big master composite down here. So this is at the very bottom of the group, and I'm going to set this to a bitmap. And of course, if you don't know what that means, I've got a composite episode where you can learn all about it. And then what I'm going to do is just put in a Z master. So Z master. And what I can do is just tell this exactly, like right now this is at 0. So the whole group, all of this nonsense is going to come out at 0, which is something that makes me happy. And you can, of course, connect that to your main output. It doesn't need any drawings or anything. It's just serving as a Z. So now whatever you put out here, it's going to tell that peg where the Z is. Easy peasy. Can you see my Christmas tree? Yay, it's Christmas time. So that's why you're only getting one video a week. I'm being really lazy and it's so good. I'm not sure what my format's going to be for next year. I do want to get more heavily into my film and start doing some of my backgrounds. I've been playing around with some of my background design. So this is a rough background that I've been playing with. Just trying to see what kind of colors I want, what style I want, how simple, if I want line work or not. I'm kind of dancing between stupidly complex line work and a more painterly chunky style. Can you do both? I don't know yet. So next year, if I'm working more heavily on the film, I might have a little bit more drawing and artwork stuff, and a little bit less harmony stuff. So I think maybe one video a week will be harmony and one will be drawing. I don't know yet though, but we're gonna play with that idea. Let me know what you think. Let me know if there's any sort of tutorials you'd like to see, things from harmony that you've been missing out on, you need to learn, or drawing things you want to see. I've been thinking about maybe doing something about character turnarounds, things that are, you know, they're drawing, but they're specific to animation type drawing. But let me know. Thanks for dropping by. Like, share, subscribe, all those things internet people ask you to do, and I will see you in the next video with more blue stuff, I think. Hooray!